to members of the media, colleagues, the wider viewing and listening public of Trinidad and Tobago. I am here this afternoon having just completed our weekly cabinet meeting to report certain matters to the population. The first matter that I'd like to give a report on was standing right here last week. I had indicated that one of the priority conversations for this government that we wanted to address under myself and the Minister of Finance was the issue of foreign exchange. We've been hearing about the difficulties with access, in particular by the average citizens, to foreign exchange, and it is something that I had immediately prioritized that needed to be addressed for us to get a better understanding of it as the government, because as you know, as the government, you're not directly relating into the foreign exchange, how it goes between the banks, the central bank. So this week on Tuesday, I chaired a meeting with the Minister of Finance, the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, as well as the Central Bank and the Bankers Association of Trinidad and Tobago, and the various chairmen and CEOs of the financial institutions that are the major traders in foreign exchange. The meeting was quite a productive one. We had a very open and frank conversation. I made it known that this government was concerned about the average citizen. And why is it that the average citizen cannot go to the bank and get access to a reasonable amount of US foreign exchange? And how is it being allocated? We understand that there's been a reduction in the supply, the inflow of foreign exchange. Some of the items that came up for discussion is a grey market that exists out there. Some of the illegal activity, for example, that may be taking place out there that affects foreign exchange. Another matter that we discussed was the bank charges. And this is something that is not unique to Trinidad and Tobago at all. In fact, I had mentioned it to Prime Minister Motley before, because she also had tackled this issue, because bank charges, service charges are affecting all of us as citizens who bank. And again, one of the main people that are affected by this are average citizens, because they feel the pinch the most. So I raised this, made it very clear to the bankers what our views are on it. I heard them say that it is the investment in infrastructure and the upgrade of software. I said, but okay, but as a citizen, I see that you're closing down retail banking, you're shrinking your retail banking services, which mean a reduction in cost. You're moving away from paper, which to me logically also means a reduction in cost. So therefore, why are we not seeing the efficiency of online services equating into lower charges and lower expenses to us, the citizens? I then asked that the Central Bank, the Bankers Association, the banks, continue to have dialogue with the Minister of Finance, Minister Vishnu Danpal, and the Ministry of Finance. And I told them we will be meeting again 2 Wednesdays from now. So not the coming Wednesday, but the following Wednesday, because the government intends to address this situation. And of course, we have certain powers in law, but I'm hoping we don't have to reach to that stage. The second thing is we had also discussed the independent observers, international observers coming. I told you all on the last occasion for the election, which as we all know is on the 28th of April, the CARICOM Secretariat had responded because my predecessor, Dr. Rowley, had written to them and begun conversations in November last year, but written to them in December, indicating we're going into an election year and we'd like CARICOM observers here for our elections. I had told the population last week with specificity that what the date was for that, and that they had responded via letter now that we had an election date. I can report today, and I'm quite happy with this progress, that as I told you, we wrote to the Commonwealth Secretariat on the 19th of March asking for assistance and that they send a team of observers for the elections. Initially, because of funding, it was a bit uncertain, but I'm happy to report that on the 25th of March, the Right Honourable Patricia Scotland, King's Counsel, Baroness Scotland, wrote back to me as Prime Minister on the 25th of March and congratulated me on my appointment and that my tenure begins at a pivotal moment when both the Commonwealth and the global community face complex challenges that require strengthened multilateral cooperation. I am confident that under your leadership, Trinidad and Tobago will continue to play a distinguished role in championing multilateralism and upholding the values and principles of the Commonwealth. And she then went on to confirm that she's pleased to advise that they will deploy a Commonwealth mission and the Secretariat will be in touch with the government to coordinate planning and deployment. So I can confirm now that the Commonwealth Secretariat, the Commonwealth, will be observing our elections in the build-up to the 28th of April and on the 28th of April. We have also written to the Carter Center requesting that they send observers as well, and we're still waiting a response from there, but I've asked the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs to follow up with them. The third matter I'd like to address this afternoon is unfortunately a matter of mischief. I'm putting the country on notice, as I've been doing in my conversations with you, the media, over the last few days. We are in a season, an election season, where unfortunately some persons who would like to have responsibility seem to want to mislead the country. And I'm speaking specifically here about the opposition and agents of the opposition. In the past couple of days, it's come to my attention that they are trying to start a conversation and to make the population uneasy and really interfere with our psyche, that by some stretch of the imagination, the government and the EBC are registering Venezuelans to participate in the election. That is completely false. I stand here today saying, please ignore this completely misleading, intentionally misleading and fake and false conversation that is being spurned from certain quarters that want to interfere with your peace and your psyche going into the election. And I went back and I pulled the cabinet minute. It was a decision taken on the 17th of April 2019. And I can attest to this because I was the Minister of National Security at the time that took the plan to cabinet for the Venezuelan migrant registration program. And I was very, very clear at that point in time as to what the effects of it would be when we registered the Venezuelans. You all may recall that period of time in 2019 and what rights they would have, and in particular to tell the population at the time the cabinet was very clear on a recommendation, and they accepted the recommendation that the migrant registration program and the period permitted to any Venezuelan to be here under this policy will not form part of any calculation of the time required to apply for residency. That was put forward frontally to the cabinet, accepted as the policy. What that means in layman terms is that we did this as a humanitarian gesture. The Venezuelans, the 16,000 odd Venezuelans who registered in that period of time, do not get any rights in law that can be equated towards them getting residency, which then affects your right or your ability to vote in Trinidad and Tobago. So nothing in this program, and you've recently seen a notice come out from the Ministry of National Security in the past few days of a decision that we took a few weeks ago. We have been continuing and extending this registration program since it was first done, by 6-month intervals, by 12-month intervals, because we continue to assist in that humanitarian way. None of these Venezuelan citizens who are registered under the migrant registration program are going to have any legal rights towards residency or the ability to vote in the upcoming elections. So please ignore that intentional misinformation by those opposed to good governance in Trinidad and Tobago. The fourth item that I'd like to discuss with you today is my first visit as Prime Minister to Jamaica yesterday, which, as you know, was for the purposes of a bilateral engagement, particularly for a bilateral engagement with the Secretary of State of the United States, Marco Rubio. I am happy to tell the population of Trinidad and Tobago, and you've seen the readouts, the official readout from the Department of State in the United States as to how the United States have given some very brief points as to how the meeting went yesterday. I am happy to stand here today and tell the population that the meeting was a very good meeting. The meeting was a successful meeting as far as we are concerned in Trinidad and Tobago. The exchanges between Secretary of State Rubio and myself were very positive. I took the opportunity to start out by emphasizing that Trinidad and Tobago is an ally of the United States, the importance of the relationship between Trinidad and Tobago and the United States, and in fact they are our largest trading partner. Also making it clear that Trinidad and Tobago is 7 miles off of the coast of Venezuela. We are the closest Caribbean island to the South American continent, and that the role that we play in between that relationship between Venezuela, the United States, Europe, etc. It was recognized that Trinidad and Tobago is a leader in CARICOM. I took the opportunity as well to advocate for other matters that are affecting other CARICOM members. And then there was an emphasis in particular on the bilateral discussions between ourselves. We play a very important role in the securing of the region. We are, as I put forward to Secretary of State Rubio, and he accepted because he is someone very familiar with this region, having operated in his political life out of Florida, that we are the third border of the United States. We are the southern marine border of the United States. That was accepted. We discussed it. We discussed the roles that we have played in recent times and in the past in assisting in operations to deal with and to target transnational organized crime, which is a big issue for the United States as well as the CARICOM and ourselves. And that is something that Trinidad and Tobago is committed to. I also discussed the types of assets that we have and the types of assets that we deploy, and that there would be a closer relationship in some of these operations that are targeting transnational organized crime. It was accepted by Secretary of State Rubio, the important role that Trinidad and Tobago has played in this area. We also discussed Trinidad and Tobago's acquisition of national security equipment. Hopefully in the not too distant future, we've put in an application for some, and we're working out some more that we will purchase from the United States that we believe will bolster not only our national security here in Trinidad and Tobago, but that of the region, and that, of course, assists the United States. So there was recognition of the importance of that relationship. At all times in the meeting, there was mutual respect. There was an understanding of both countries' positions on certain policy matters. It gave me, Trinidad and Tobago, the opportunity firsthand to discuss with the Secretary of State the matters in energy, because they had as one of the items, as did we, the need to discuss energy security, not only for us here domestically, but throughout the region. And as I emphasize, we also do supply energy products, LNG, to Chile in South America. We were the largest supplier of LNG in the past, in the mid-2000s, to the eastern seaboard of the United States. So the important role that we play there, and also something that is not emphasized maybe sometimes enough, that we are major, we are in the top 2 suppliers, exporters of ammonia in the world, which is a fertilizer product, and that we supply some of this fertilizer to the United States. Secretary of State Rubio understood it. I then took the discussions to the Dragon gas deal, to our relationship with Venezuela, and emphasize the importance of it, not only to Trinidad and Tobago, but I was able to set out how it would also affect the rest of the CARICOM region because of the important role that we play in supporting some of our CARICOM brother and sister nations throughout the region. That was accepted. I also took the opportunity, and this is the benefit of a respectful relationship. This is the benefit of what we've built up over the past few years with the decision makers in the United States. And when my predecessor and myself have spoken to you and told you we speak to persons on both sides of the aisle, we remained engaged with whoever is the government in the United States. Yesterday was a day that was a good day for Trinidad and Tobago because that really came out. So I was able to then get into some level of granular detail and discuss with the Secretary of State, who is one of the main people who is going to be charged with determining the policy to deal with Venezuela and in particular energy going forward, exactly how this transaction is structured, the work that we have already done along with Shell to make it a reality, and the effects that it will have, in particular on the rest of the region. I was happy that in that conversation, Secretary of State Rubio did indicate that he was pleased for this information because he was getting it firsthand. He understood, and he said that U.S. foreign policy is in no way meant to affect or harm Trinidad and Tobago, in particular with what we're doing for energy security. There was a recognition that this Trinidad and Tobago's role in energy security is not limited to our domestic situation. We also discussed, I had the opportunity to tell him with some level of detail what is going on with our exploration and production domestically. And his team understood that because these are conversations that I have been having with the decision makers in Washington for the past few years. So they understood. And if you had seen the readout of the press conference by his spokesperson the day before we set off to Jamaica, so that would have been on Tuesday, they indicated very clearly there that they understood the importance of energy security for Trinidad and Tobago and the role that we play. So it is always a bit disappointing, but not surprising, when you have certain people try to twist and to turn words and try to upset what we're trying to achieve for Trinidad and Tobago. I also came back, I returned, because it was a very busy day yesterday. I also had a meeting with the Prime Minister Motley, and myself met with the delegation from Haiti. I then went off to meet Secretary of State Rubio, and then afterwards from that I went straight to pay a courtesy call on the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Prime Minister Holness, and was warmly received there. So it was a busy day yesterday, but it was a good day for us in Trinidad and Tobago. Secretary of State Rubio has asked that we remain engaged. He has said that he would like to visit, and I invited him to Trinidad and Tobago at the appropriate time. And he has basically given an undertaking that they will remain engaged. He explained to me the U.S. policy that they're applying. I understood the U.S. policy, and we agreed that there is a lot of room in there for Trinidad and Tobago to achieve what is needed domestically, the Dragon gas deal, as well as the role that we play throughout the region that they will give us support on, and the achievement of the policy. I made it very clear that Venezuela is our closest neighbor. And we have a relationship with Venezuela that can be a beneficial relationship, again, for the region and the Western Hemisphere, because there's a lot of built-up respect. So to come back and to see certain persons who have absolutely no responsibility saying that the United States would be looking at Trinidad and Tobago in a negative light because of the amount of times that Young and my predecessor, Prime Minister Rowley, spent with talking to President Maduro, it is the exact opposite. So again, people in Trinidad and Tobago understand that we are very precise in what we do, and I can give you the assurance standing here today at this platform once again, when I operate, it is always for the betterment of Trinidad and Tobago and never self-serving. So I stay quiet, I keep a still tongue when they're throwing all these lies at the population until the appropriate time to address it. So in a nutshell, it was an excellent meeting with Secretary of State Rubio. We are going to stay engaged in communication, and Trinidad and Tobago is going to be proceeding. That is no 100% surety that things may not change along the way, but the commitment that there is not to be any harm to Trinidad and Tobago, and us having the opportunity through me as your Prime Minister to explain firsthand to the decision makers how it affects us and the region and the role we play in energy security outside of the region, in South America, in Europe, in the United States, redounded to our benefit yesterday. So I'm happy to report that. I look forward to continuing that on your behalves. It takes me to the last point I'd like to raise. No matter how many times we stand and we talk to the population, all of the eggs in our gas sector are not in the, as they like to call it, the dragon basket. You still have those persons who achieved very little during their tenure, and in fact, may have produced the worst energy deal that Trinidad and Tobago has ever had, costing us billions of dollars still to date. Is now talking about Calypso. But I'd like the population to be reminded, as I've told you before, that the government has been very engaged with both Woodside and BP on making Calypso, which is our deep water project, a reality. The government actually completed the discussions and the negotiations on the fiscal terms some time ago, and it was then up to BP and Woodside to work out how they would be executing the project. We continue to be engaged in them, and I'm told that in the next few weeks we should be able to come back to the population, if they don't do it before us, and make announcements as to what is going on there. But we have pursued Calypso and Deepwater, and we have taken it quite a far way towards becoming a reality. And I also want to take this opportunity to point out to you all a release that came out today from BPTT, which again is a direct result of the work and us being engaged with BP and others over the last few years in a way that promotes Trinidad and Tobago. So today, BPTT took final investment, well, they announced FID, final investment decision on Ginger Gas Development, which is a gas project that will come in 2027, as well as the exploration success at Frangipani, which is what we call infill drilling, which is really going into fields where they've already been exploiting the gas, but they think they found more hydrocarbon. And once this government is working on your behalves, rest assured that we will do all that is possible to ensure, one, Trinidad and Tobago gets the best revenue possible for our resources, unlike others who think, well, give incentives and it brings no revenue to Trinidad and Tobago. We have proved that we are getting higher revenue for you for our gas resources, and two, we will work with all of the stakeholders to make these projects a reality. So I'm happy today to quite fortuitously come to you with one of the largest producers of gas in Trinidad and Tobago, BP, with this type of announcement today, which is a direct result of the work that we have done on your behalf and that I have done previously as the Minister of Energy and will continue to do in this portfolio. So I'll take a few questions at this stage. Thank you all.
Prime Minister, good afternoon. Just wondering. So you will have been part of the negotiations when Prime Minister Rowley was in office as Prime Minister, Mr. Maduro in Venezuela, Mr. Biden when he was President, concerning the lifting of certain sanctions that allowed for progress with the Dragon gas deal. Are you seeking, was the government seeking similar exemptions or exceptions concerning the present tariff and other sanctions issues being implemented by the present administration under President Trump?
So, Jules, the answer to that question is that is part of what the conversation was about yesterday. As was discussed between Secretary of State Rubio and myself, our OFAC license is in place until October. He recognized that. The landscape is changing. For example, the introduction of tariffs or the suggestion of introduction of tariffs. So the opportunity that I got on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago yesterday to sit down with the person who is in charge of deciding, and there is a lot of discretion in there, how things are to be applied, is invaluable for Trinidad and Tobago. And they made the point. They had made the point to me even prior to my visit to meet with Secretary of State Rubio, which was a bilateral invitation. Trinidad and Tobago shouldn't underestimate that the credibility that we have built up in Washington over the last few years counts for a lot. So the answer is yes, I directly engaged that conversation, and that was the commitment that we would remain engaged.
Realistically, based on, just want to follow up, if you don't mind.
Just 1 second, Mr. Wilson.
Realistically, how soon could the population expect? You said there are no 100% guarantees, but the flow of gas from Venezuela to Trinidad and Tobago, be it from Dragon or any other field, based on your conversations with Secretary Rubio yesterday?
Well, Dragon really is the field that is going to be affected by it. We have Manatee. Manatee is going to flow by 2027. That's taking place. Again, it gives me an opportunity to repeat the achievement that was in allowing us with a unitized field to pursue 2.7 TCF of gas on our side. That is proceeding full speed ahead. Shell sent me the photos last week for the fabrication of what will be one of the largest platforms that's taking place in Mexico. And if you go down to Robbery in the Tufco yard, the bottom part of it that is going on is being fabricated, which is the largest project ever fabricated in Trinidad and Tobago. That's proceeding. That is the largest investment and is going to be the largest supplier of new gas in the past few decades. We have, as I just told you, BP have a number of things. EOG are announcing. So that is a constant supply. So we will be, with the Dragon, we are continuing. So I have been constantly engaged with Shell. We haven't slowed down. And that was the message yesterday as well. We are proceeding full speed ahead. And understand, please, as our largest trading ally, the effects this can have if it doesn't happen. And Secretary of State Rubio was very, very clear that he appreciated the opportunity to hear from us firsthand and from the Prime Minister firsthand on that and the effects it would have. And he kept emphasizing, we are not going to harm Trinidad and Tobago. Anthony?
Prime Minister, do you think the OFAC license that is coming to an end in October is going to be extended?
Anthony, is not what I think, or I don't think that's speculative. But what I can tell you is, you would recall a few weeks ago, Chevron's license was not continued and they were given a wind-up period, correct? What has happened since then with that license? If you follow it, so after the whole world was collapsing and those naysayers who wanted to sell a story that was it was going to be shut off, Chevron was then granted a further extension on the wind-up. Things are fluid. There are conversations taking place. This is not something that only affects us, but we got the opportunity to put in our own advocacy. I did raise the point that our OFAC for Dragon is in October. Secretary of State Rubio said, Stuart, Prime Minister, that is some time off from now. We are going to continue to work with you, etc. Nobody's going to give that blanket commitment at this stage. But I emphasize, he said, I'm not going to harm Trinidad and Tobago after hearing how important it was for us.
Go ahead. Are you so? What happens now with the Dragon field? Is Shell going to continue to do any work, or
we're proceeding? As I just said, we are proceeding full speed ahead. We now have that direct channel of communication to this one of the decision makers. He welcomed it. He said, Prime Minister, we have to continue this. There was a lot of very friendly banter that was encouraging. And I think they recognize the stability that we provide, and they want to see a continuation of that.
Are you going to speak to Maduro about these issues at all?
President Maduro?
Yeah, President Maduro, sorry.
I remain engaged with the Venezuelan government at a very high level, and that conversation doesn't stop. At this stage, there's nothing in particular for me to speak to him about. One of the points I'd like to raise is I saw in their readout, there was discussion about this transnational organized criminal gang trend in Agua. We are committed to that. I had already given the commitment, and I was able to tell Secretary of State that if there is transnational organized crime operating or coming to operate in Trinidad, we want to stop that as a government. And we recognize that if we utilize our anti-terrorism legislation, it may give us a little bit more power to deal with these notorious type criminals. We are prepared to do that as a government. I'd already spoken to the Honorable Attorney General about it, and it gave me the opportunity to raise it frontally with Secretary of State and to ask him, please, if you have information and evidence that's going to help us in Trinidad and Tobago, because we have to go to court to make the application, provided he immediately turned to his support team and said, get it to the Prime Minister and get it to Trinidad and Tobago. So we're going to work closely on those types of things.
So do you have evidence that gang is in Trinidad?
We have no evidence of that. But the same way you see us doing with other, because you see it very often in newspapers or from time to time that the AG has gone to court and gotten orders to declare certain persons terrorists, etc. Let's take the preemptive strike. Let's take it. So if they arrive here, we already have the power in place to deal with them differently. Ms. Buram. Oh, sorry, Ryan.
Sure, sorry.
Unless you wanted to allow ladies to go first.
No. Go ahead, Ryan, please.
By all means, ladies first.
Good afternoon, Kim Woodram, Express. Good afternoon, Prime Minister, Ministers. I think what I want to ask is, basically, outside of the energy security issue, what was the Secretary of State, concerned about? Really, that what else does the U.S. want Trinidad to support in terms of how it plans to deal with Venezuela? But also,
well, let's answer them one at a time. So let me start with that, and then you'll answer your follow-up if you don't mind. The answer is no. I mean, he made it clear that the United States government sees Trinidad and Tobago as an important partner in the region and one of the leaders in CARICOM, and in particular in energy security and national security. We spoke about other things. So, for example, I raised this potential tariff on shipping where if you have Chinese vessels in your fleet or you have an order for Chinese vessels, I said how that would affect us in the whole CARICOM region. So again, we got into some discussion with policy there. I suspect what it was to hear from us firsthand how we see things, and to acknowledge the role that we play, not only in the region, but in the Western Hemisphere. And that is, it gave us a perfect opportunity to carry out the conversations we wanted to, which were respectfully received and built upon. There was a lot of very friendly banter in between, because there are certain similarities between himself and myself and these types of things. Very friendly. There was a follow-up.
Very quickly, sorry, and that is what you said before, so thanks for rounding that up. Also, the Secretary of State a little while ago said that the U.S. is not going to tolerate any kind of action by Venezuela against Guyana or ExxonMobil or any of those types of facilities. Is that a growing concern, those tensions?
We, at the CARICOM level, remain concerned about what happens between Venezuela and Guyana, absolutely. Our position in Trinidad and Tobago is that we respect the sovereignty, and that is what must be respected. There are matters before the International Court. They should be determined before the International Court. We want to see peace in the region. This is a zone of peace, and that's our constant messaging. That is a message that I've had with President Maduro, myself, in Venezuela, and that the United States understand with President Ali, because we had a CARICOM heads of government meeting last week Friday, which was the first one I participated in as a head, and that did come up for discussion, etc. Ryan.
Sticking on the situation with the immigrant situation, was there any kind of conversation in particular about assisting Trinidad and Tobago with security measures and probably investigation for the Trinidad gang and other gang activities and so on?
We have a very close working relationship with the United States and the various governmental bodies in the United States. For example, the DEA, the ATF, the FBI, etc. So I emphasized the value of that relationship, and that is a mutually beneficial relationship because, of course, we at the southern border was part of my advocacy. That was accepted, and there was a commitment that we will continue in that working relationship. As I say, we don't have confirmation of Trinidad, or we want to take the preemptive strike of them operating here. We want to take the preemptive strike. Let's go to court, see what we could do in having them declared a terrorist organization under our laws. And Secretary of State Rubio immediately agreed that they would provide us with whatever information and evidence. They have much better capabilities because of their size and their technology from a global level than we do. So we'll get that from them.
Sticking to the immigration issue, right? As far as our local situation where we have a significant amount of immigrants right here, what happens to these registered immigrants after the registration is cleared? How long would they be allowed? Would they be allowed to stay? What is the policy being built with there?
Well, the policy, as I said, started off in April 2019, and if you recall, I believe that was set for a year initially, and then as they come up for expiry, we then take decisions as a cabinet to extend them. And that is what we've been doing. So I don't want to preempt what we may do on the next occasion. The Minister of National Security will have to come to the cabinet, make the argument. We will make a policy decision as to whether we continue it or not.
Prime Minister, the President of the United States of America announced today 25% tariffs on all automobile imports into the U.S. The United States has taken...
That are not made in the U.S.
That are not made in the U.S. The United States has announced actions against its northern border and its de facto southern border. The United States has a free trade arrangement with Mexico and with Canada. They have announced issues with the European Union. What gives you the confidence that Trinidad and Tobago will get a hearing in Washington, D.C. when the U.S. government has taken action against Canada, Mexico, Europe, Japan, Korea, all much larger economies, possibly closer to the United States than we are?
That's an easy one to answer, Anthony. We got the hearing yesterday. Gave us an opportunity with the Secretary of State to put forward our arguments of how things can affect us in the CARICOM region. So we were provided with that hearing. There was a commitment to continue communicating as life unfolds. That's the best commitment you can get. And I also think we are on a much smaller scale. So the effects of those types of decisions have potentially a more crippling effect on us and our economies, which was the point that I made, for example, on the shipping side. The United States have discretion as to how they apply these things. So let us be happy that yesterday it was a good day, it was an excellent conversation and discussion with commitment to continue.
On the issue of Venezuelan citizens being registered to vote here, a Venezuelan woman...
They are not being registered to vote here.
A Venezuelan woman married to a Trinidadian man, or a Venezuelan man married to a Trinidadian woman, would they be
eligible?
Possible? Would there be a possibility of that category of Venezuelan citizen being allowed to vote?
The answer is within the applicability of the law. So what is clear is whatever time they may have spent as a registered Venezuelan migrant under the migrant registration program does not count. So when you look at the law, and I can speak to this because when I was Minister of National Security, very often on a daily basis files come as to persons who have made applications for residency, not only from Venezuela, but from many other countries across the world in the exact circumstances that you've described. They've gotten married. What immigration does is they do their investigations as to whether it's a marriage, for example, of convenience, or whether it is not a marriage of convenience. Are they in a position to support, in this example, a Venezuelan spouse going forward? Are there children who are born in Trinidad? Even in those circumstances, there is no magic formula. So yes, there are periods of time, but it is up to the immigration officers investigating the particular case and the circumstances of that case that will then make a recommendation to the Minister of National Security as to whether residency should be granted. But the point that I want to make and emphasize again is that this migrant registration program is not going to assist in that whatsoever.
On the issue of foreign exchange, are we any closer? Is the country any closer after Monday's meeting to there being greater availability of foreign exchange for the, as you described them, the common man in Trinidad and Tobago?
We will come back and report on that. What was very interesting in the meeting, the Minister of Finance is here, is when I was probing and putting pressure on those who have the responsibility. A certain possibility came up, which I immediately pounced on, and I said, let us explore that. I would like to find that solution. We're not going to get more foreign exchange. So if we're only earning $10 million, $10 million US dollars, that is what we have to distribute amongst and as equitably as possible amongst the population. So that's why I told them I want to focus on the average citizen. So I've asked the Minister of Finance, the Ministry of Finance, and the Central Bank to work along to look at the various options and come back next week, Wednesday. So as we progress, I will always come and report. I don't want to be premature, but I'm hopeful that there's something there that we may be able to do.
Do what the Barbadians do and put something in your passports.
But the Barbadians have a lot of restriction on the taking of foreign exchange outside of Barbados and these types of things. We've long moved away from there. I'm hoping I certainly have no intention for us to go that way. All right?
Flotation of the TT dollar come up?
The
flotation
no,
of the TT
it did
dollar
not come up. No, it did not. Jesse?
Prime Minister Jesse Ramdeo, thank you so much. Just wanted to quickly find out, did the issue of the Cuban health workers participating in the medical programs feature in the discussion at any point in time? I know it's something that regional leaders, they expressed some concerns with. Did that feature in the discussion?
It did not feature in our bilateral conversation. We had had certain conversations prior to my bilateral with Secretary of State Rubio, and just today at Cabinet I instructed the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs to work along with the Minister of Health to get our position to the United States. I'm happy to report that there was developed in the development of the policy and everyone trying to understand what the United States was referring to, a number of concerns that they had, that certain things, if they were not done, would fulfill what they're describing of, human trafficking, and Trinidad and Tobago has ticked every single box. So I was happy to see that, and I think we are one of the. Well, let me just leave it at that. We have ticked every box. So I've asked today the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs. Let's be proactive. Let us send our information to the United States because we certainly don't fall in the categories of their concern at all.
Let me just take the opportunity to also ask, have you furthered any discussions as it pertains to the UK visa issue, or are there any updates to report on that matter?
I have asked for a follow-up meeting with the United Kingdom government, and in particular, I am hoping at the highest levels, meaning from my office to the office of the Prime Minister there, but I have not had that follow-up conversation as yet. I've been dealing with a lot of other matters, but that is a priority item that I was discussing with the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs yesterday. I also asked Prime Minister Motley, because both herself and I, when we were practicing attorneys, did some cases with Prime Minister Starmer, and she's going to be meeting him in the next week. So I asked Prime Minister Motley to just give a nudge in my direction. Okay, a couple of last questions, please.
Prime Minister, just wondering, as you mentioned, exports of ammonia and so on from Point Lisas, I would imagine, right? What is the present state of play in terms of the gas supply situation for those plants in Point Lisas and also for Atlantic LNG in the context of the efforts by the government to increase supply, be it locally or from across the border?
I am happy to report, standing here today in 2025, that we've continued to maintain about 2.6 BCF of gas a day. So it has not changed is the answer. That took a lot of work and effort, because 18 to 24 months ago, as Minister of Energy, when I was looking at the projections, I was particularly concerned. And we worked overtime, and I'd like to thank the staff at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries for working along with me many, many hours, and then also the stakeholders for finding those spots to keep it at 2.6. And I'm hoping we will maintain that until these projects come in. I just announced another one here in 2027. We're expecting to rise. So they're producing the same amounts. It also gave me an opportunity to tell Secretary of State Rubio, at Point Lisas, there's a lot of American investment. For example, the Koch brothers are one of the main investors, or an investor down in Point Lisas. So that resonated well.
Just quickly on the Forex issue, I know you've spoken to BAT on different issues, and there's some work going on there. But are you going to reach out to the business community at this point in time?
I received submission from one of the business chambers that gave me an idea. I want the Minister of Finance and BAT and the banks to come back to me first. The truth is, I understand, and that is the reason why I raised it with the central bank and the banking sector. I understand the SMEs problems. I understand the medium-sized business problems. I understand the average man and woman's problem of going into the bank because they're going away to travel, or they want to send a little money to their children, and they can no longer access that cash, or they're getting a minimal amount. So that's my first area of priority. Everybody wants. It's a limited amount. So I want to make sure in our allocating, we find some way to alleviate the average citizen's needs. Last question. Prior, you asked already. Let me give.
Prime Minister, last year the U.S. Exim Bank would have offered a facility to Trinidad and Tobago in the remit of national security. Was that a part of your discussion with Secretary Rubio, and is there any plans for expansion of that facility? That
actually did form part of the conversation. I'd like to thank the Minister of Finance for getting that done at my request. So we have in an application, the first application, in the area of national security, and I indicated to them where our second application will be coming also in the area of national security to bolster or hard assets or physical assets in the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force and Police Service. I'd like to thank, last question prior.
I want to go back to the Cuban medical issue. Are we going to continue with it? And how many workers do we have in Trinidad that are from Cuba?
The Minister of Health should be able to provide you the exact number from the briefing document. I think we have about 87 nurses and 9 medical doctors. The answer is yes, we will continue with it. There's only one last, Ms. Boudram, last one.
Thank you. Quickly, same thing with the Cuban issue. Dr. Fuad Khan made some comments that there may have been instances, or there are allegations of the Cuban doctors' salaries going straight back to Cuba and rather to them. I mean, Dr. Khan is a former government minister. You want to address that?
That may have happened under his tenure, but it certainly isn't happening under our tenure, because I was very, very clear on that. We actually help the Cuban medical practitioners that are contracted with Trinidad and Tobago, just to give you all an idea, set up their own personal bank accounts here in Trinidad and Tobago, and that is where the government pays their salaries. So I don't know what happened under his tenure, but I know what's happening under my tenure. I also can tell you that we provide, for example, passage for them to come, and at the end of their contract to leave. We provide for vacation in between. We don't have anything to do with their passports. They hold on to their passports. We provide housing. Their terms and conditions are determined by the Chief Personnel Officer, the CPO of Trinidad and Tobago, under this government. So I'd like to thank you all very much for being here this afternoon. Until.